Welcome to Hot Topics in International Trade, brought to you by Braumiller Law Group and Braumiller Consulting Group. Hi, this is Bob Brewer with Braumiller Law Group and Braumiller Consulting Group. Thanks for joining us for this podcast. Joining me today, once again, as you know, Kerry Wang.
Hi. Senior
Associate Attorney here at Braumiller Law Group. What's the topic today? Well, Bob, we're going to talk about future trade policy in relation to the U.S. presidential election. What we're not going to do is make this a political podcast. Now, I have an opinion that I might share a little bit of, but, this is going to be based in facts and not just Bob Brewer espousing what he thinks. Because right now, nobody really knows. Every time I tune into CNN or anybody else says it's a tight race. Now, what are we talking about here? We're talking about, in the case of either party being elected, what's really going to happen? What role does trade policy, though, play in U.S. elections, Kerry? I mean, think about it.
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. So trade policies drive a direct impact on economy. It impacts manufacturing, the jobs, trade deficit. That's why for the candidates usually use it as a differentiation point to showcase their trade policies, to show how they're going to resolve the trade deficit, how they're going to promote the local manufacturing and promote the trade practice. For voters, it's also important, especially for those are in the sectors are directly impacted by trade, such as manufacturing, agriculture, those traditional industries that rely on imports or compete with the exports. So, and even for the consumers, its trade policy is very relevant because it can directly impact the consumer price, like the price we paid, right? So it's very relevant to our daily life. And I can give you an example. I don't know if you know the chicken tax.
Chicken tax.
Yes. So chicken tax is usually the first story. I explained to the peers what I do. So chicken tax was in the 670s. The President Lyndon Johnson. During that time, there were a lot of Western European portraits, chicken meat, that flooded into the United markets because chicken were considered a delicacy back in the days. So in order to limit the chicken exports, the European countries, France and Germany, they posed additional tax on the chickens. So in response, the president imposed a retaliatory tariffs on the European light trucks and vans. So that is 25%. It is still remain existent.
I know, since
So that basically shapes the manufacturing industry to some extent, and also it also directly impact how the cars the European cars you see on the road, right? So that's just an example to highlight how trade can impact our daily life.
Yeah, I mean, I always look at it from this perspective, too, that when you look back on some of these laws that came into place, they have been in existence for decades.
Yes.
And just haven't changed.
Yes, exactly.
And the same thing,
especially for tariffs. While they're put on, it's really hard to just remove the tariffs, like the chicken tax, like the Section 301 duties.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, think about it. What was your expectation when Biden got elected? What was he going to do with the Section 301, do you think? Was he going to just wipe them away? It's like, really? No.
Yeah, so no. I think before we talk about the Harris administration, I think it's nice we can revisit what Trump did under his first term.
Yep.
I think that can help us to look at this from a comparative perspective. So under Trump's administration, he did a few things, but his trade policy is centered around tariffs. He posed $365 billion tariffs on $665 billion imports. Among those, $300 billion are Chinese imports. So that's what Section 301 duties. It bases on unfair trade, the Chinese unfair trade. And additionally, he posed additional tariffs under Section 232 duties on alumina and steel imports. So that's a lot of policies centered around tariffs. Additionally, he replaced the former NAFTA, North America Free Trade Agreement, with so-called United States Mexico Canadian trade agreement. So, although despite the provisions are substantially similar, the name is different. The United States is the first now, United States USMCA.
Yeah.
So and he also withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, so further limit Americans' access to the Asia Pacific, right? So that's kind of what he had done, right? It's from the short term, we can a lot of impact we saw these days are short term impact from the trade policies. It's really hard to conclude on the long term impact of these policies, but that's what he did under the first term.
Right.
So what is going to what will happen if he get elected for the second term? I think in general he will step further in the path of protectionism, like what he did under the first term. From his comments recently, he was saying he is going to pose a universal 10% tariffs on all the imports.
All imports. Yep.
And slapped 60% on all the Chinese imports. So that will be a huge it will be shocking to a lot of people in the industry. How much of this will come to realization, where it's unknown to us, but based on a lot of the policies he said and the threats he made under the first term, they all came to realization. So we have to take in those threats seriously. And additionally, he mentioned he's going to further renegotiate the USMCA. Apparently, the current USMCA is no longer benefiting United States anymore. He said he's going to renegotiate a better deal, right? So in general, his approach will be even more protectionism and align with what he did under the first term.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're aware of this. There's a new bill introduced by Republicans. So this is target on the Chinese firm. So what they're trying to do is, under the first term, a lot of Chinese firms, they moved away their manufacturers from China out to, like we talked about, nearshoring in Mexico
Right.
or Southeast Asia countries to avoid getting Section 301 duties. So this new bill is targeting those Chinese firms. They're trying to expand the Section 301 duties on the Chinese firms who are currently using this creative strategy to avoid Section 301. So this is just one step further.
Well,
Yeah.
doesn't it get into substantial transformation then? If I'm going down to an IMEX, I can prove
Yes.
that qualifying for USMCA.
Exactly. So that's what a lot of Chinese manufacturers they were utilizing is a substantial transformation, which is if we have effect a substantial transformation in a third country, these goods are no longer Chinese origin, so are no longer subject to additional 301 duties. However, the new bill is targeting at the specific Chinese firms. So apparently they think Chinese firms are using this as a loophole to avoid the Section 301
Well, there was the case on the aluminum extraction where
Yes.
and that really brought this to light. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I see where you're trying to get around it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and on the contrary, for the Harris administration, she was a vice president under Biden administration. So a lot of the Biden policy probably will likely be maintained under her policies. So first of all, under Biden administration, a lot of those tariffs were maintained. It's kind of back to our the what we discussed before. Once it was imposed, it's really hard to be removed. It's such a good revenue generation for the government. They generate lots of revenue, so government can use this money to invest in the
Treasury
local
Department gets it,
Yes, and but in addition to instead of Trump's strategy, which is decoupling from China completely, I think Harris has a strategy is more focused on strengthening supply chain resistance, especially focused on several sectors that she's talking about: renewable energy, clean energy, semiconductors, and high technologies. So those are the sectors she has a focus instead of promoting completely departing from the relationship with China. And additionally, we would think she will take a more multilateral approach to promote more trade deals with the allies and even some countries in the Trans-Pacific regions.
Well, I'm going to plug my most recent article. There's
Yeah.
no such thing out there, kids, is decoupling from China.
Yes.
It can't happen. My article was on just the silver lining
Yes.
with Walmart. I
Yeah.
mean, look how many Walmart stores there are in China.
Yes.
Look how much Walmart, 80% comes from China and Walmart.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
where America shops.
Yes.
The largest retail base in the United States. It's SMEs. Whether you're talking China, and
Yes.
this young lady's from China, she knows, born and raised there.
Yes.
Just like it is. If I shop on Amazon, I'm still shopping Chinese companies.
Yes.
You shop on AliExpress, which I do, I'm still shopping.
Yes.
So for all that we're talking about here, this decoupling, it won't happen. We
won't
depend on
happen, yeah.
both economies depend too much on
Exactly.
each
So
other.
yeah, I agree with you. I think the ways they have to come up with a way to work together.
Yeah, I mean, come on. But that's really, it's just to plug my article there now.
Yeah, and I want to do another promotion here.
Okay,
So
go for it.
Adrian and Gavin actually wrote an article where they deep dived into the USMCA joint review.
Yeah.
It's up to renew
Yep.
in 2026, and they kind of also use a comparative approach, like compare Trump's administration and what a Harris administration will look like. So
Right.
that is a really good article.
Okay.
I would recommend everyone to take a look.
Now, I like I said, like we said, this is not political, but
Yeah.
everybody has an opinion. And I want the next thing I'm going to say to be based on fact. And from what Kerry and I do, and I swear, this comes up in the majority of our conversations extending into, did you sign a retention agreement with us?
Yeah.
But we talk about who was the IOR.
Yes.
Who is the importer of record, and that is who's responsible for paying
Yes.
these tariffs. That's who's responsible for just about everything if you are the IOR.
Yes.
Now, do those fees that I am paying get passed along then to
Yes.
my consumer?
Exactly.
Well, if I'm paying 20, 30, 40% more, yeah.
Yeah, especially that's a direct impact.
Yep.
So if the Trump's policy, like 10% universal tariffs on every import, 60% on Chinese imports, what's gonna happen is you go into the store, you saw everything on the shelves, or the price are going to increase because IORs are going to pass those costs to the consumers.
Yep.
And additionally, not everything are commercially available in the North America.
That's right.
Yeah, so a lot of them, China could be their only sourcing option.
That's
so
right.
that could cause inflation, and like it's supply chain disruption, global trade disruption. Not to mention if this high tariff policy will cause additional retaliatory tariffs from other countries,
Yep.
which will further hurt American exporters, right? Like the local agricultures, which are traditionally relying on exports.
Yeah.
So it can cause a lot of disruptions.
Well, the way I look at it, too, I mean, if you're talking about bringing manufacturing back to the United States, as you and I both know, China is the sourcing capital of the world. This ecosystem that has to be created, not with just the consumers for your product, but the sourcing.
Yeah.
And that's still going to be subject to the tariffs.
Yes,
that
yes,
if you're
yes.
still, bringing these products in.
Yeah, I saw this all the time. Like my clients, if they're relying heavily on Chinese imports, like steel, like a lot of those American heavy manufacturers here, they rely on Chinese steels. Because of the additional Section 232 duties, they lost their competitive edge. They were not able to just to basically maintain their business, and they lost their livelihood, which is really sad for those importers who heavily rely on imports.
Yeah, I mean, I got notes in front of me here. We've only got like a minute left, but, study up on it, because there are a lot of things that were said to have been created through the tariffs, because, Trump said this is a beautiful word, tariffs, but a lot of these things just never came to fruition that he talked about that were happening. And we're in the business.
Yes.
I mean, this is what we do for a living on a daily basis.
Yes,
so
yes.
take it as it is. But
in the short term, definitely we see the price hikes, we see the inflation. The goal of this, I think, is one of its supposedly to support, to promote the local manufacturing, force the companies to open more manufacturers.
Right.
So one thing I read it from a news. So in one of the, I think, speech Trump recently made. I think he mentioned one of the case, which was Apple Watch.
Yep.
So supposedly he said the Section 301 duties on the smartwatch came out. Apple approached him and saying to ask him exempt Apple from the Section 301 duties. Instead, Apple promised to open a new factory.
Yeah.
So I think Trump also viewed the tariffs as a very transactional, viewed
It's leverage.
leverage.
Use it as leverage.
Exactly. So leverage tool,
Yep.
increasing negotiation power.
Okay.
But yeah, unfortunately, as a consumer, we're going to cover the price.
And it's always tit for tat claris when we get into that because they're retaliatory tariffs
Yes.
on our goods when you do that.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
so we are out of time,
Oh, okay.
Kerry.
Yes.
I mean, but I appreciate you stopping by and chatting
Of course,
with us
of
about
course.
this. Really
Yes.
do.
It's a very interesting topic.
It is.
I appreciate that.
So, well, I don't know how many days we're out from this election, but wow, let's just wait and see what happens.
Yeah,
All right. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. Appreciate you.
thank you.
Bye-bye.